Before we dive in, can I tell you the sentence that I hear the most from smart, successful women? I know I should be investing. I just don't know where to start. If that's you, you are not behind. You've just never been taught. And that's exactly why I built the Invest Like a Woman workshop series. It's one live session. We'll cover how investing actually works, how to start with what you already have, and the exact first steps to take this month. You don't need to be rich to start. You need to start to get rich. Head to the link in the show notes and grab your spot.
Welcome to Fiery Femmes, the podcast where high achieving women build wealth, redesign their careers, and create lives with real freedom. I'm Sheena, an accredited investor, former tech sales professional, and the founder of Fiery Femmes. After a decade across global SaaS, startups, and my own reinventions, I realized the most powerful thing a woman can have is optionality. So, in every episode, we explore the future of work, the psychology of wealth, and the practical strategies that help women build careers and lives that evolve as fast as they do.
Jen, I just want to say thank you so much for the time today. Obviously, I think we met unconventionally via me scoping out on Reddit on
Yeah.
who are the fiery femmes and wanting to know how you got there, how you retired early. I think that's most people would love to have that achievement and would love to share it with the world and how people can get there as well.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I ended up I grew up in a house that did not prioritize finances in any way. Like, it wasn't something that we ever kind of talked about. So, even as a young kid, I never really thought about saving or anything. I worked, but that just went towards my normal expenses. And it wasn't until, I went to college on a scholarship, I went to grad school and had a lot of that paid for. And then I got involved in tech. And I was in some debt when I started working, but suddenly I was making this salary that I had never made before. I didn't even know it was possible to make that kind of salary as a 21 or a 22-year-old. So I just ended up kind of saving by default because I was used to living kind of at a lower level. So and then when I got together with my husband, we went to a financial planner as we were combining finances, and they did a financial projection of how much money we would have if we retired at a traditional age. And the number was you know, kind of just this crazy large number. And it made us realize that we could just continue saving more aggressively now and stop working, you know, while we were much younger, so we could travel and do, other things. So that's kind of the short story of how I ended up being able to retire early.
And that's so good that you were able to realize that you can actually do that. And also just the act of seeing a financial advisor. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people are kind of against seeing financial advisors in, I don't know whether that's just like the internet space, but a lot of people seem to be against it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because again, my family didn't talk about finances, and I don't know that my husband had actually been to a financial advisor before. But as we were getting married, we had some inequality, in our finances. I still had a little bit of debt, not much. I had a little bit of debt left over, and he had been working for longer than me, so we just kind of wanted to make sure we were, on the same page as we bought a house and everything. And I found it extremely useful because I think when I was younger, finances made me really anxious. There were times when I didn't have, money to pay rent and I have to borrow it from a friend in grad school. So I always felt anxious around money. And so I didn't like to manage it or look at it much. So having someone kind of present me with this is what your, kind of spending looks like and this is what your savings looks like made it more accessible for me to start doing that on my own. And even today, I still use a financial advisor. I think it's great for me, especially with volatile markets and other things happening. I know that I have a person that is kind of an expert, in managing finance. And I know that I'm not, and I know that I'll freak out. So I think it's good. I think it's good for me to see a financial advisor, and I would recommend it to other people that are open to it. him as well.
Yeah, I feel the same. I actually had a meeting with our financial advisor yesterday, and it's just so good because sometimes as well, like you have this thinking mentality or view on something, and
Yeah.
they try to,
It's
I
kind
would say, talk to you about it in a way where basically they're trying to tell you don't do that.
yeah.
Like, don't do that, and, like, again, like, they challenge the way your way of thinking, and, like, they have facts to back it up, and, yeah, it was great. So, I like that about them. Some people definitely are so against them, but I think it's up to you on, like, if you really need someone to help you, definitely.
Yeah, and I would say I'll just say this so my husband manages we combine finances like as a household, but our retirement accounts are still completely separately. So he self-manages. He doesn't have any desire to to have a planner, but I have mine, with a planner. And so yeah, it just helps to make me feel more in control and like more comfortable. And I have a female financial advisor and she's very good about kind of sharing her own thoughts about, investment to me as like someone, that's familiar with my background. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really handy, and Jen, I wanted to ask a few questions, but something that I always ask for the guests is what is something that is not on your professional LinkedIn profile?
Probably like I don't really talk about like my interest in like the arts and performance on LinkedIn. So, I worked in tech, so a lot of it is very like kind of schooling and like published papers and like tech focused. But on the side, I've been doing some acting since I was like a small child, and I've been very involved in like the comedy community since 2008, 18. So for several years, and it takes up a big chunk of my time. And yeah, it's like my little kind of secret hideaway.
That's crazy. I would be so scared.
Yeah, I think, y starting younger in, like, a male-dominated environment, I kind of had to talk myself out of, like, having stage fright or out of, like, speaking up, and this is gonna sound so dated, but, I started working in 2002, and my company actually offered a class called Confidence for Women. Like, which sounds awful, but it actually wasn't. It talked about things like even how to like sit, present yourself like more confidently and how to kind of speak off the cuff a little bit more and how to stall till you get like a real answer while you're thinking over it in your head. And I think they did a lot of improv activities there, which later I realized that I really liked, but I kind of think it's almost this fake it till you make it type situation, just learning a few techniques and then eventually, yeah, if you convince yourself you don't have stage fright, you might not have stage fright.
That is insane. I feel like did you mentioned that was it stand up? You did stand up? You do stand up?
I don't do stand up, but I do narrative storytelling. So telling personal stories like from my life, both like funny and not. And then I also do improv and sketch comedy, like writing and acting. So kind of a number of different things, but not stand up.
Very cool. Still, I think that's a scary thought to be, yeah, in front of with all the lights in front of you. I think that's a real skill, and it would empower you in so many different aspects of your life too.
Yeah, I would say one more thing I would add to that is I also took a Dale Carnegie like speaking class that was just geared towards women. Maybe like 10 years into my career, my company paid for it. And with that, we met every morning, and every morning you'd have to stand up and like tell a story, just like a quick story. And I think that just the routine of having to do that, even if you don't have anything to like talk about, kind of helps you get over a bit of that nervousness because maybe you're talking about something you think is dumb, but you have to talk. Like you can't just stand there and not do it.
Got it. That's really good that you had that training. It's very intentional and it seeps out in other parts of your life as well, not just like professionally, but it's super helpful to know how to
Yeah.
communicate properly.
Yeah, 100%. Especially in like the world of tech where everybody's trying to get like a word in edgewise, being able to like feel like you belong in the room and present yourself like that, I think is really important.
For sure. I'm gonna Google the like confidence for women, like workshops,
Yeah.
those kind of things. Like I think it's super helpful. I'd like to think that I have enough already, but always good to learn more or like what are those unconscious things that I do that can signal not so confident. So I'd love to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, a really big one is honestly posture, like sitting up straight and kind of it's weird, like leaning like
Slouching
this,
kind of
like
thing.
leaning back, you just appear more confident than like kind of like huddled over a table.
Right.
You just kind of don't seem as confident when you're like kind of, yeah, huddling yourself. So just making yourself bigger, in a room, making yourself take up space helps a lot. And I think if you sit in like a room with a number of people, you'll see the people that do that and yeah, I think you can notice that like they seem more like they belong there than someone that kind of appears nervous or hunched.
Yeah, that's so true. I think just imagining that now, you would almost feel intimidated if someone's like super relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Okay, cool, cool, cool. I think that's a great insight for the audience for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like hopefully over time they've changed like the title of that class to not just like appeal to women and hopefully anybody that's like new, in an industry that they're not as familiar with, I think could benefit.
Absolutely. And do you think that has shaped the way that you navigated work or ambition?
I think so. I think early on, so I didn't have a traditional like tech background starting in tech. I mean, I have an undergrad in like applied math, so I am like techie, but I didn't come in as like a programmer. And so very early on, I definitely felt intimidated by people around me. I felt like they knew all the answers and like who am I to speak up as this like young person in the room that doesn't know what they're kind of talking about. And so early on in my career, I did get feedback that like I didn't talk enough. Nobody said like I appeared like meek or anything, but I know what they meant. They felt like you don't always look like comfortable or things like that. So I do think something like that really helped me and helped to give me the confidence to just present myself slightly differently. And when you have like a mannerism that's a little more confident, it is true. I think you start to feel that way. So yeah, I think it was really good for me. And when I took the speaking class as well, I got a lot of feedback when I was done with that class about how my presentation skills increased and how I was much more kind of visible on my team and to other teams within my company.
And can you tell me, you were doing those classes, maybe like some exercises that they were telling you during the workshops, the classes. Did you make intentional effort to practice outside of those classes?
Yeah, I made an effort to like do it like in my meetings. Like I'll just so one example, like this is from early on when I took like the confidence for like women class. At my job, one of the things you had to do when you're starting out is you would lead these big bug triage meetings, and they would be for bugs in software that you might not know anything about. You're just basically utilizing the room to like prioritize them in order and like that people should work on them. And I feel like every day in that room, I would try to like adopt that posture and like speak like I knew what they meant, even if I didn't know what they meant. So just talking, without hesitation, like reducing the number of times you're like, and then just getting to know and remember what people work on. So you can kind of redirect if you don't know to the right person rather than like kind of pausing and looking for someone to like fill in the gap. So yeah, I actively like took the feedback I got and the information I got from that class and like applied it immediately.
There you go. Implementation is key.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's super
Sure.
amazing, insightful. I think a lot of people need to learn how to communicate
Mm.
efficiently. Um, that's amazing. I'd like to talk about, I guess, like your thoughts on breaking family cycles, financial situations that your family were in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned before, I mean, I think my family, I don't know what they were classified as, probably like lower, like middle class. We didn't live in like an expensive area. I was raised by my grandparents. And so, they were a bit older and didn't have like a lot of money kind of coming in. And so again, we didn't talk about money. And like when we went grocery shopping, it would be a situation where like, my grandmother would have a calculator that she'd be like adding up the prices of groceries to make sure she didn't, go over the budget uh for the week. I don't feel like I ever like went without as a kid, but it was definitely like kind of I knew that I couldn't do all the things that like maybe my friends could do because we didn't have like the financial resources to do that. And one thing I did do was like I got I got good grades. Like I was a good student. I like following rules. I like tests. And my family hadn't even really mentioned like college to me or anything, but I just knew from my friends like if I got better grades, I'd be more likely to maybe get a scholarship to college or something like that. So honestly, I just worked really hard. And my family, we had like one college graduate in my family, my grandfather, but no one else had like pursued higher education at all. And so, when I got into college, I had a big financial aid package due to like the situation my family was in. And then I also had merit scholarships on top of that that I applied for in order to be able to like afford to go to school. And then I think in school, it was just, I never really had like a disposable income. I worked like a part time job that did not pay, it paid like minimum wage. I just kind of didn't save anything because I didn't have anything to save. And then this is kind of related, but my grandmother passed away my senior year of college. And she was the main part of like my family structure that I was close to. It was, it was kind of like losing my mother. And I felt like I was alone. I think I got like $1,000 when she died, and that was like all the money that I had. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had like already applied to grad school. And I got in, had to, grad school was paid for, and they give you like a small cost of living stipend that would like pay for an apartment. And so I kind of did that like out of default because I wasn't like I didn't know if I could get a job or if I would like earn money, and I was kind of just going through a lot emotionally. I went to grad school, and while I was there, it was the same thing. I did not have a disposable income to use, and I didn't have anyone externally in my family I could like rely on for money. And so, yeah, occasionally, unfortunately, I had to like borrow money from like friends or like a boyfriend. And when I finally got a real job, it was like, now I have all this money. Let me pay off like my small amount of like debt I have. I don't need like a bigger apartment. I'm so used to living in this like small thing. I just need a car that like gets me to and from work. I just never kind of had that lifestyle bloat once I had more money. And so I really just did not want to end up in a situation like I grew up in or like my remaining family members were in where they couldn't handle like if an emergency happened. I mean, I remember my grandmother crying if like the car broke down, like how are we going to afford to, pay for this? And I just knew I didn't want that for me. I didn't know that I was going to become like financially independent early. I just knew that I wanted to be able to like take care of myself and not have to constantly be worried about money. I think when you're used to living on so little, like, it was easy to just avoid kind of the bloat that I saw, like, around me.
That's really good that you didn't have that lifestyle creep.
Yeah.
Incredible discipline. I've definitely seen it with people in tech, and I would say I'm probably guilty of that myself. It's so easy to just buy the new tech, a better apartment, better car, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna say, like, I never, like, went without, but, like, I definitely, worked with, like, single people that may have been a year or 2 older than me that were, like, buying houses and buying, like, new cars and buying, like, all, like, designer clothing. And I mean, I got like a nice apartment and like my car wasn't like crappy, but like I didn't have that desire to have that like next brand new thing or to like get the new phone like year after year. I just kind of became like happy with what I have. And I think I treated myself more with like travel than with like material things. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's the value that you have. I really like that you sought after scholarships.
Yeah.
I l I love that so much because you can't it allows you to do what you're good at without this so much of the stress of, like, having to work till exhaustion and then also study.
Yeah. And I mean I did work part-time like in college, as well as like part of, my financial like aid package.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was important for me to go to school. Again, I didn't it was just kind of drilled in my head that like debt was not good. My family, like I said, they didn't talk about finance. We also didn't really have credit cards or anything like that. Like everything was just paid in cash. So I wasn't really as used to like debt aside from like maybe a car loan or something like that. And I just did not want to, I was scared of it, like I was just nervous about the whole thing.
Yeah, I noticed that. I think it's good, you mentioned that I'm not sure in the States, with financial aid, do you still get a little bit of debt for your
Yeah.
school?
Yeah. So as an undergrad, I had to take out like a very, very minimal like bit of debt. And honestly, some of that was because I chose to live in a single room rather than like having a roommate, just because I had bad luck with a roommate my first year. So, but it was a very minimal amount of debt as an undergrad for me. And then in grad school, typically in the States, your grad school is funded. Like if you're going into like a PhD program, your schooling's paid for. And then depending on the program you're in, you get like a cost of living kind of stipend, which is probably enough to like be a roommate in an apartment and not like a ton extra, but it's enough to kind of squeak by with.
Yeah, for sure. I also think that your peace of mind and like not living with someone that's not aligned with you is totally worth it.
Yeah, it was for me. It was just a much better kind of situation. So I don't regret that part at all. I will just mention too in the States after my grandmother died and I didn't have any like external people like helping me in terms of like finances because they would contribute like a very small amount. I'm talking like, maybe like $200 a semester, just like a little bit of money. But I had a dean that I knew from some of my like activities in college, and they knew that my grandmother had died, and they actually talked to me about money and was I going to be okay for like my next semester, and they helped me apply for federal grants in the states so that that would be covered. So I would just. I know it's like a really weird situation, but I would encourage people to seek that sort of thing out too, because I didn't even know I was like eligible for a federal grant being not having like an income. That wasn't something that I would have found out by myself.
Really good to know. And I would say as well, it's good to encourage people to open up because sometimes when you open up about a problem, people give you these solutions that, again, to your point, you don't even know that that's a thing.
Yeah, no idea.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a really good reminder. And Jen, I'd love to, I guess, like you mentioned that you knew what kind of amount you needed,
Yeah.
and you automatically thought, I don't have to work until 65, 70. Most people don't really know that that's a thing, or even look at like their finances, do the maths. They're too afraid to quit like that job. Maybe it's an
Yeah.
identity thing, but how did you get to that thinking?
I think honestly, it goes back to that initial meeting with like the financial planner. So one of the things that he asked my husband and I to do before the meeting was just really strictly for 1 month, like, look at what you're spending on everything. And we just kind of did that like transparently. And um, that's kind of how it really hit me that like how much I was spending was so much less than like what what I was kind of saving. And I didn't think right then about, like, retiring early, but I think the idea was more like, well, if I keep doing this, what am I gonna do with all of that money when I'm, 65 years old? Like, what am I gonna, donate it also to a school or, like, a foundation? Like, what am I going to do with it? And just I wasn't super, like, happy in my job, so it was kind of, like, backwards, like, thinking about well, maybe I can like utilize some of this to enable myself to I took a break first, I mean, I went to college, I went to grad school, I started working in tech, I got burnt out, 10 years in, I felt like I didn't even know if this is what I wanted to do anymore, what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just like needed a break. And so I took a year off of work and having like my finances in order allowed me to do that. So I took a year off. I quit my job and I think that gave me like the push. Like I kind of figured out who I was without work. I figured out more about things I liked and the types of I definitely like I think this is a pattern I worked too much. I worked while I was at work. I worked when I was outside of work. I worked on weekends. I thought about like work all the time. And so taking a step back like really allowed me when I came back to my job to set better boundaries. So there was like Jen at work and then there's like real life Jen who's like not doing work kind of all of the time. And that like sort of self-discovery of who I was without my job for me personally, I don't know that I could have found without taking kind of time off because it's just caught in this like kind of wheel of everything. For me, it's just kind of how my brain worked, It's always looking towards the next thing. So I really think that allowed me to realize that I had stuff outside of work, and I also took time to, like, establish just more hobbies, like, for myself. Work wasn't, like, my only thing. It's like, I do this, but I work in tech.
And I think that's also it touches on the job title as an identity.
Yeah.
And it's great that you took the time to discover that, you know what, I just want to kind of get to know myself more. What do I even enjoy doing without work? Like, who is
Yeah.
Jen without the job title? Because a lot of people, especially now, obviously there's a lot of redundancies, layoffs, like forced to kind of like get you out of work. And people really struggle with like, who is this person without their job? And I'm
Yeah.
like thinking, I can think of so many things, but it takes people a lot of time.
Yeah, it does, and I would also just add for me, like, I was in a PhD program, like, in grad school that I actually, I took a leave of absence from to, like, start working in tech because I just wasn't sure, like, what I wanted to do, and so I still kind of had these inklings in my head, "Well, maybe Jen wants to go back to school, like, maybe it's, like, Jen the professor and not, Jen, like, the tech worker," and I think it's so rare that people take the time to, like, think that sort of thing through or even have the opportunity, like, you're constantly, like, needing to, like, earn more money and you're in the cycle of work, like, when do you have time to, like, figure out that stuff? So I feel lucky that I was able to take a step back and to kind of figure it out.
I completely agree. Most people get shocked that I've taken like a few years off just doing X, traveling to this. Like, not, I think most of the time people have, especially women, a break when they're having kids, which is
Yeah.
totally the opposite of a break. It's
Yeah.
expensive work without pay. So people get shocked at like, oh, what do you mean? Like you just took like 2, 3 years off to do this and you didn't have kids at the time? It's like, no, just wanted to do what I thought I wanted to do. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first, like, kind of announced it at work, so I talked this over, like, with my husband. We kind of had an agreement, like, I'd take a year off and then it might be the same thing, but I'd start, I'd restart, like, working. And so I gave my job plenty of notice, and everybody was kind of, like, surprised, because I'm, in my early 30s, and they're like, "What are you gonna do? You're just, like, not gonna work?" And so that made me feel a little, like, awkward at first too. But, I don't know, I just kinda said I was gonna travel and, like, left it at that, but I left my job on really good terms, like, I gave them plenty of lead time, and I left and I stayed in touch with people while I was gone, off and on, so I came back to essentially the same job, like, 13 months later, and I realized the career climate is, like, different now, but they didn't hold a space for me. It was about, like, keeping up a little bit with your, like, networks, and it made it less scary to, like, be able to, like, come back, I think for me, like, just keeping in touch with what was going on. And so I mean, I recommend it to, like, other people. Yeah, you'll see people post on, like, Fiery Femmes on Reddit about, wanting to take a break and having the financial means to do so, but being, like, kind of scared to do it. And I understand the scariness, but, like, I'm a big proponent of do it. Like, if you're feeling, burnt out, if you're feeling, like, unsure and you have the means to, like, take a little bit of time off, like, that year I took off, it didn't impact when I was able to, like, later quit working. It didn't have this, like, gigantic financial hit that I think some people might be worried about. I mean, I lost a year of salary, but I was able to, like, come back and, like, negotiate for a little bit of a higher salary and kind of make up for it. But that was not my thought when I took a year off. It wasn't like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna, like, lose out on this pay and, like, not be able to retire early," because I still didn't know if I wanted to retire early. I think it's a little easier sometimes than people think. Like, it doesn't have to be this big scary thing, to do.
Exactly. And such a huge proponent of that as well, of like, you can make a decision and it's going to be okay. Like, it's
Yeah,
not such a big life changing thing that you can't go back.
yeah,
I was having this discussion with my husband and I really wanted to move to Amsterdam. And he was like, what if we hated it? I'm like, so we move back.
yeah.
I'm like, I don't, if we hate month 2, month 3, if we hate it, we can go to Portugal, Lisbon, give it a try. If we really hate Europe, which I highly doubt we would, we can always go back to Australia. That's totally fine.
Yeah, and, like, you never know unless you try it, and I don't like to look back at things and, like, regret. I mean, in terms of the work thing, like me taking a year off let me work for another 7 years. If I hadn't taken that year off, I would have totally burnt out much, much earlier than that. I just know like I would have. And so you have to think about like the benefits that might come from it too. Just clearing your head or getting a new environment, opening like new opportunities.
Definitely. And also great to know that your partner, husband, is super supportive of that as
Yeah.
well. How did you know that you both were on like the same like financial page, or that you're aligned with that path?
I think some of it came from like I knew we both worked at the same company, so we obviously had some idea of like how much, the other person was like making. And it wasn't a topic like early on, with us dating at all. I think it just kind of developed like slowly over time. Like I saw the way that like he lived, he owned an apartment, very like modest like apartment, like lived fairly modestly, but really prioritized like travel. And I kind of knew I was already living like in a similar way. But we never shared like exact numbers with each other until probably, a couple years like into dating. I think that it was just this weird coincidence where like we could kind of tell we were living the same sorts of life, and it happened to like mesh in that way. And he was the first one that actually told me about like fire, even though I ended up like doing it first. But he's the one that first mentioned it. He was definitely a little more like investment savvy and like involved in finances than I was like from a younger age. And traveling was not just traveling, but like living independently was really, important to him. And so I think probably the first time it really came to like a big discussion was when we were engaged. We talked about it before, but when we were engaged, we you know, bought a house and we got approved for a loan to buy a house. And the amount we got approved for was this, really large, like, number. And neither of us wanted like a house like that cost that much. We didn't want like all of our income to be going towards that. And then I think that just kind of opened the floodgates to talk about like everything, and the whole like seeing people around us like, buying like multi-million dollar homes. And, we're happy with like our smaller house, like, in this neighborhood, and we don't really need, like, the next kind of biggest thing. So, yeah, it wasn't something that was, like, it just happened to mesh, like, in the right way. I don't know that that would ever happen with, like, another kind of set of people, but it happened to, like, just kind of mesh with us.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you two were very compatible and you were
Yeah,
clear on what was important to you and what you valued versus
yeah.
what everyone else was doing, which is super important.
Yeah, I think that was it. And yeah, and we once by the time again when we met with a plan, we had pure insight into like how much each other was like spending on stuff, how much we were saving. So I think even though that was really hard for me at first to be like open about like finances, it's what kind of, led to like where I am today.
Yeah, beautiful. And you mentioned earlier that you joined finances, but your retirement separate.
Yeah.
Tell me about that because I think there are a lot of, especially with couples now, either like they live together and then get married and someone owns an asset, someone doesn't, like all that kind of thing. What were the considerations and the actions that you took?
Yeah, so early on, I'll just say this as background. Like early on, when I first moved in with him, I moved into like an apartment he owned. And so, I paid, like, we negotiated what a rent would be. I paid, like a rent and then like a portion of the utilities. And then it was like, it was just like a standard, like kind of like agreement. And then when we bought our house, we were financially separate mostly, but we had a joint account for like shared, like a shared checking and savings account. And we both put down the same amount, like as a down payment for our house. And then eventually that just became like this, like a kind of shared money. Like, I don't feel like I'm explaining it right, but both of our paychecks went into like a joint checking and savings account. But my 401k and his 401k, are totally separate. Like my IRA and my other investments are totally separate. And so are his. And we didn't always put like numbers on those. We just like maxed out when we were working, like the most we could kind of like put in them. And then during times when we would get bonuses at work, like year-end bonuses, we would just split them both down the middle and each invest them how we wanted to invest them. So it really became kind of shared money just almost as soon as we got married and bought a house. Um,
There you go.
but I I know he has, like, retirement accounts, investment accounts, and obviously we have, like, transparency into, like, how much is, like, in them, but yeah, I don't have any problem with us, like, managing them separately as long as, doing anything, like, dumb with them, and I think we're both, like, reasonable people, so it's not something I don't worry about how he's investing his money.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people have mentioned to me that they have that their accounts are super joined together, like as a
Yeah.
couple, and I'm like, I would have anxiety with the fact that he would probably be thinking, why are these boots like a couple of $100, just like blah blah blah, or like this makeup. I'm like, I don't. I feel like I'm happy to contribute an amount and then, like, let me be with, like, my miscellaneous spends budgeted.
Yeah. I think we ended up doing slightly the reverse. So we ended up each coming up with like kind of a personal budget for ourselves. And that's like the amount of money that like say I can spend like no questions asked, per month. And we like each had that money. And like early on when we were really, really focused on like getting our budget down, I think we both tracked it like a little more closely. Yeah, I didn't want to get when it's like I don't want to get a question about like why'd you buy the fancy boots? It's like, well, it's
Yeah,
my like chunk of budget.
yeah, and I'd be like, "Look, there's a 10-year use of this boot,
Yeah.
$4 per
Yeah.
wear, maybe less."
Oh my gosh, that comes up with yeah, we joke about like the cost per the cost per wear, cost per use.
It's a must, my negotiating tactic. Sometimes I like the more expensive couch. Just this story, he really wanted to buy a couch, and I didn't really see the value of getting a new couch. I was like, "Why are we getting a new couch? It's another job to do, another thing to worry about, and then now we have to get rid of the old couch." I'm like, "We don't need a new couch." Anyway, lo and behold, we went to the store. I think our couch at the time was like 5 years old. So I guess we can get a new one. So when
Yeah.
we got into the store and I was like, all these couches for me, they kind of look the same. He found this couch and I'm like, it's okay. And I found the other couch that was really nice, but it was double the price. So I'm like, okay, he's definitely gonna say no with a price. And I had to build my argument and calculate that. I was like, okay, look, the other couch that we had was this much. We had it for 5 years. So it was basically 50 cents a day. This one, so pretty, so comfortable. It's huge. Yeah, it's like this much per day. So that's how I
Yeah.
closed in.
Yeah. That's a good tactic though. I mean, it's not, it's less than a cup of coffee. Right? Get the nicer
Exactly.
couch. Yeah.
Exactly. And Jen would love to, I guess I just move into the point where after you've had your 1 year break and you
Mhm.
came back to work, did you have that mentality of like, okay, now we're saving for retirement?
No, not when I first came back. I don't think like I had that. I think probably sometime in that year because I quit. My husband was actually able to take like a sabbatical from work, so he was a little bit more senior than me, so he could take some time off like without pay and return to his position. So we both got a taste of like what it would be like kind of if we didn't work, and so I think that that's what probably put the inkling even more of the inkling in our head about okay, what does it take to like be able to actually like, not work. So I would say maybe, like, a year into, like, working again, I was having a better time. I was still, like, enjoying it, but I knew I didn't wanna do it, like, forever, and so I would say probably that's when we didn't really have to change many of our habits, but that's when it was like, "Okay, like, let's do what we can to, like, make this, a reality," and I think probably the biggest change in that was just, like, analyzing bigger purchases more. Like, at one point, I needed a new car, and so really just thinking about would that impact how does that, like, impact things and doing what you mentioned for the cat, like, what's the cost per year, of, like of doing this, and how does it impact? So, we have a lot of spreadsheets. We started having, like, a lot of spreadsheets just, kind of tracking net worth and withdrawal rates and things like that, and, yeah, I would say about then is where we got kind of really more serious with it, and then probably another, like, double down um once I actually, like, quit. I know it sounds
Mm.
weird to, like, not know before then, but when I actually, like, quit for real in, like, 2019, I felt like it was gonna be, like, definitely, like, I'm just leaving work, but my husband, I think, was a little like, "Oh, like, maybe she'll, like, go back in a year." So I think after that was when we really got into, like, making sure that, like, we would be, like, okay, in the long term and really being even safer with, like, what we were spending, our money
Yeah.
on.
Got it. Perfect. And, did you ever have, like, idle hands, or do you kinda already know what you were gonna do with your time when you stopped working?
So we had a big trip, like, planned. That was, like, one thing, and it was, like, right before the holidays, and so I knew I would be, like, a little busy with that, but I didn't have, like, a big thing kind of planned. I think I thought, like, "Okay, I'll figure it out once we get through, like, this holiday season and once we take, like, this break." I mean, I was still kinda toying around with going back to school or, like, doing things like that, and then, COVID happened, and suddenly, like, the work just changed, like, in general. I mean, everybody was, like, working from home and, uh, it's just a very different, like, environment, and so, I think during that time is when I started to pick up comedy more. I think some of it was, like, probably coping with, like, what was happening, in the world, like, around me, and I started doing a lot of comedy, like, online during that, and I was like, "How can I how can I make this something even bigger?" I mean, I had started doing it before I quit, but how do I make this bigger and, like, a bigger, part of my life? And just kind of did everything I could do online until things started opening up, like, again, more in person. And we also did a cross country move during,
Uh-huh.
maybe in 2001. We moved across the country and
Wait, was that
we moved.
2021?
Yeah,
Okay.
2021. Sorry, not
Yeah,
2001.
I was like,
Yeah,
"Wait."
we moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, and some of it was just to be closer to family. My husband could still work from home. It was just to have, like, kind of a change, environment, and I think for us both to just figure out, what things for us, look like kind of moving forward, and I think with that, I'm in a city now that has a lot more opportunities for me to do performances and to get involved with, just the general, like, performing kind of community, and honestly, like, I know it sounds small, but it takes up a lot of my time, like, I do write a lot on the side, and I wouldn't say it's like a career at all, but it's, like, fulfilling, it's very fulfilling, for me, and also just being able to, like, explore a new place and see family when I can and travel.
No, that's beautiful. Definitely sounds like it fills your cup. It's something that makes you happy, and you deserve it. You worked so hard.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, when I worked, I felt like I always had this struggle. This is even before I got a job. Um, I was always, like, very good at, like, math and very good at, like, analytical type things, but I felt like I had this, like, creative part I didn't know what to do with, and I feel like I kind of, like, suppressed that, like, a lot when I was, like, working, or maybe it would just come out a little bit with, like, friends, but I wasn't doing anything to kind of, like, nurture that kind of part of myself, so when I actually, like, left my job, it felt, like, just amazing to get to work this, like, different part of my brain and this, like, other side of my, like, personality, and I honestly, like, I feel like, so much more confident and, like, comfortable, like, in myself now that, like, I feel like I've used, like, both halves and I can use, like, both halves rather than, like, kind of being stuck in, like, a corner.
For sure. And it's so interesting because we've had many guests who said that same thing, that they have this creative part that they would love to use more, but their day jobs are absolutely not that creative.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have that creative side. They have side hobbies to fulfill that. Sometimes if they have the time or the mental capacity to do it. And there was one who she paints,
Oh, yeah.
and she's like, "I'm just so in the flow and can just get so lost in the ability to create." I'm like, "That's so beautiful." I think there's definitely a correlation with the amount of intensity of their work and that creativity flow.
Yeah, and I have other friends that have, moved on from, like, tech jobs that are painters, they're writers, they're directors, they're, performing artists, and, yeah, I think that happens to, like, a lot of people. It's like you don't have the mental energy to do everything you might want to do while you're working a full-time, like, demanding job, and this isn't a I mean, I feel like I had a good long career. I feel like I did well at my job, but when I started doing more performance and especially like narrative storytelling, so just telling kind of personal stories to like an audience, like I got paid for like a story like a few years ago. It was the first time I gotten paid for doing that. And that felt like the biggest accomplishment, like to me, like being able to like tell something that is like intimate myself, like in a way so that like someone is giving me money to like do this. It just like filled me in a way that like my professional career like didn't quite kind of hit. So
Yeah. That's
that's like the flow, I guess. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna look into that, and yes, absolutely. It's it's crazy because the flow, for those who don't know what the flow is, because apparently there are people who don't,
Yeah.
it's that work that absolutely does not feel like work,
Yeah.
that you can
Mhm.
just do for free. It just so happens that people value it and you get paid.
Yeah.
But if you can find your flow or the job that makes it feel like you're not working, that's the key, I would say.
Yeah. Definitely. I think, it's hard to find time to find what that is, as you're establishing yourself in a career. There's people I know you've probably met people in your life from a very young age, like they know what they want to be, they know what they want to do, like they're very
Yeah,
comfortable like in themselves and in their job. And I feel like they're so lucky. But there's still time
agree.
in your life to find what that is, for you.
I so agree because there were people in my high school who knew that they wanted to be doctors, like,
Yeah.
done. And I was like, I don't even know what like, I don't know. I've changed careers a few times. And yeah, so I always said that whoever knew what they wanted to be, whether they wanted to be an accountant, a physicist, a doctor, or a teacher from that young age, I think that's such a gift because you're just
Yeah.
happy. You know the direction that you need to go. You have that clarity.
Yeah. And I think for people that like me or maybe feel that like don't have that from a young age, it's important to like keep, a little bit of an open mind, like while you kind of figure out like what that thing might be. Cause it might surprise you. It might be something you would have like, oh, I'll never do that. And then it is your
Yeah.
flow.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wanted to ask you as we're wrapping up our session, you have been in tech for a while and you've seen the changes, right? What advice would you give to 20-year-olds today?
Don't be scared. Like everybody was the person in the room that didn't know everything, at one point. And it doesn't mean you have to be like a know it all, but like take in everything that you can, like utilize all the resources that are given to you. Like I know my company had like mentoring and like these other like classes and things that I mentioned. Like I think just seek out those opportunities. They don't always present themselves to you. Like you might have to talk, but just open yourself up to like new experiences and like understand that everybody was there once.
There you go. And I find that people want to help in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah, they totally do. I got involved in mentoring when I worked. I had a mentor during most of my career. People are happy. The bulk of people are like happy to help and want to see you succeed. And they have such wisdom that like you don't have yet. So use them.
Okay, there you go. And Jen, I'd love to also ask, what's one thing you would stop telling young women in tech?
What I stopped telling. Gosh, it's almost the reverse of what I just said, but like I think for women, it can be hard to be like aggressive and not be labeled with a negative connotation. I remember like hearing the story like a really long time ago. I'm probably gonna like, misdo it, but it's like, oh, this little boy like bossing people around on the playground, and someone's like, oh, he's gonna be like a CEO one day. And like if a girl does the same thing, like it's like, oh, she's like, like a B word, not good. I mean, that's an anecdote that people will say. And I think just realizing that like being aggressive or present or like talking a lot in the workplace doesn't mean that you're going to be labeled like in a negative way. Like you have just as much right to be there as the guys do. And so don't like make yourself smaller to like make people, I don't know, like kind of not bow to you, but you know what I mean? Like make people like kind of cater. Like you can still be like a big person and have like a positive impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. People, a woman is opinionated, dominating,
Yeah.
they'd like say she's a piece of work. She
Yeah.
can be tough. Whereas if it is definitely a guy, they would be like, "Oh, he's so strict. He's very stringent on XYZ. Like, we got to do a good job." Like, yeah,
Yeah. So I think the positive part of that, going back to like what I would recommend people doing, like if you're a woman starting in tech, seek out female mentors. Like look at the women, around you that are doing a good job or that have been at their job for like a long time and seek out those people like for advice. Like it's not a bad thing to be like an aggressive woman or to be an opinionated woman or to be outspoken.
I agree. And especially to those who have parents who weren't in the corporate world,
Yeah.
and they didn't have that guidance to know how to deal with the corporate world, politics and stuff. Seek out those mentorships early on, 100%.
Yeah. And I think just circling back to one of the first things we talked about, I mean, Uh, this is just a quick story about me. I think when I
Yeah.
started grad school, we had to take this seminar, and basically, it was every week, and we'd have to read a paper, and then we'd sit around the room and we'd like analyze the paper, like, look for mistakes or talk about what went well. And for the longest time, I never talked in that room because I felt like, wow, an expert wrote this paper. Like they knew what they were talking about, and like who am I to question what they wrote? Like I'm just a first year like grad student. So being able to like get over, those hurdles is like so important, but also like hard to do. Know that your voice has power and it has meaning, and people do, care what you think, even if you're not like the expert. You still, you were hired because they saw promise in you and they, felt like you were going to do a good job. Like they value your opinion. So it's good to share it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jen, I appreciate your time and your openness to sharing your experience and your insights on
Sure.
how you got into your scholarships, the opportunity to work in tech, and the time to realize when your fire date is. That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Fiery Femmes. If this resonated, share it with a woman in your life because we rise higher when we rise together. Don't forget to follow and review. It helps more women access the tools and conversations that build wealth and confidence. For more career and financial empowerment, come hang out on Instagram and YouTube at Fiery Femmes. I'll see you in the next episode. RSU, options, ESPP, ESOP, ISOP. What do they even mean? When I was working in tech, no one could really explain in simple terms what my tax implications were from the equity in my compensation. There were times that I had to explain to the accountants what I mean. It took about 3 tax returns to find an accountant who knew what I was talking about. This is why I created equitytax.ai, an easy to use AI powered app to help you calculate tax payable based on your equity. Try it out today at equitytax.ai.